this message wherever you stand. I'm calling every woman, calling every man. We're the generation, we can't afford to wait. The future started yesterday, and we're already late.
Good morning, Detroit. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Empowered Living. I am one of the hosts, Marshall Bryant. The other host is...
Good morning, Detroit. This is Laura Sala.
And thank you for joining us again for another episode. Today, we are going to be talking about men of service that take an active role in the community. So that's a very powerful topic.
I believe so. I believe it's so. And long overdue.
Yeah.
Yeah, long overdue.
And it's been a lot going on nationally and in the United States. A lot of stuff is going on. I don't even know where to begin, but one positive, well, it didn't start off positive, but the person took something and made this gesture very beautiful out of a situation that was not very good at all. I'm sure you heard about the Waffle House shooting.
Yes.
So,
tragic.
Yeah, tragic.
Tragic.
Very tragic. And the gentleman that, took down the gunman, his heroic efforts, from what I saw yesterday on social media, someone that I follow on social media, I saw where he actually, James Shaw Jr., he took the proceeds that were given to him, that people were donating to him, and he paid for the funerals of the victims. And I thought that was very, very beautiful.
Very benevolent, very altruistic. I mean, like I just said, a hero in his own right on so many levels.
Right, right. And that's, what we're talking about today, men that take an active role, that see something that needs to be done, and they step up and they do it, not just saying, oh, it's not my problem.
No. Yeah. And this man has put his own life in harm's way just to save somebody. But once again, we can't say enough about this gentleman.
Yeah.
He's truly a gift.
Yeah, he is. He has children himself too. And, so to, just think beyond yourself to be giving
beyond
like
yourself,
that.
Right.
And we need to see more of that. And, all of us just take a role with things that we see that need to be done.
Just do them.
Yeah, just do them.
Just do them.
Yeah.
You're right, Michelle. So, to him and his family, on behalf of Empowered Living, thank you.
Right. Thank you, and God bless you.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so last week we also got to participate in Peace in the Streets.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. An awesome conference.
Yes.
An awesome conference.
That was a beautiful thing. So many people that, that are taking an active role, you know. And we need to see more of that in the community. And we actually got to go to the wall, the Burwood Wall.
Okay.
And
right.
That's how it ended. It didn't just end with a conference, just everybody's just speaking. You go from room to room, just a normal panel. How it actually ended and it came together. Those that were able, it was like 3 bus loads.
Okay.
Left downtown's law school in
Wayne State, right?
Wayne State. Wayne State's law school. And they took a trip to the Burwood Wall. So the Burwood Wall, of course, is the historical wall that, separated.
It was a dividing line.
And it was that cultural dividing line that pretty much,
divided.
Racist.
Right. It was a racist wall.
It was
divided the white citizens and the black citizens of Detroit and in that area.
Yeah. So that's where we met and finished the conference, talked about things. Activists were out there, they marched, and they also talked about how they would work together with different, because see, even though that wall still is kind of like it's just there, and we're saying that is not there, but still in some ways we still have that divide in different areas, because you already know when you go a certain point past Telegraph, some things might be happening, going to get stopped a little bit more. Alta Road, when you get past there, it looks a certain way. Then you get on the other side, it looks another way. So it's just basically talking about in the city how those divides still exist, but we're going to bring some change and come together.
And we need to.
Yeah.
We need to. And as you mentioned too, we don't have the visible walls
Right.
within the city,
Mm-hmm.
but there's still a lot of dividing points within the area
Right.
as it relates to race and some other cultures. So
Yeah.
we just need to be aware and work together as a community to get past these walls.
Right. Right. And they have a strong organization over there where they come together, people that grew up in that area that were very small when they, understanding, they might not be able to move out of the area into the other suburban areas or other places they wanted to. So they culturally learned with their family over the years, and they gave that history of what that looked like. But then they also showed that they had artists to come in
Okay.
and to paint the wall, give it more creative, where it's not just this excuse me, this wall that's up, that's this image of just division, which is ugliness. So
Yeah.
artists have come in and painted, and then talking about other artists and how connecting the arts and beautification of the city is going to be one of the things that's going to be used to make that division.
The question I have, Marshall, is that with your tour, because I didn't make it down to the tour that what you did, but was there ever mention of why the wall is still is erect?
Why it's still there?
Yeah.
No,
That
that
never came
question never came up. I kind of thought about myself, like why it's still there.
Okay.
But part of it, I guess I don't know, to obstruct it, I guess you have to have some kind of city ordinances to obstruct
Oh, I'm
it
sure.
too.
Yeah. I'm sure that you have to
Right.
I don't know, get signatures or whatnot. But you would think, and this is just you and I having our
I know.
But you would think that since
Somebody
a lot
say
of people
tear it down.
wall, why not tear it down? Because everyone knows the significance of the wall.
Right.
So why it's still erect? I'm just asking the question, Detroit. That's
And
all.
then sometimes, then you have people on the other side that say, well, it's part, even though it's not always pretty, but
It's
it's
history.
a part of history. So, let's not forget, but let's change it. We can change it. We can go
Yeah.
around it, So it's kind of like, I guess that community has made some decisions about it, and they're still making decisions about it. And to bring artists in to actually paint the wall that
Well, yeah.
says, we're putting some effort
Some sort of
into
change.
to change it, it's kind of like that, we'll never forget, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Good answer.
I guess. I tried. Well, today we have some phenomenal
Yes,
gentlemen.
yes.
Both of the gentlemen actually were at the conference, and they have been doing a lot of public speaking and engagements around the city, talking about social injustices and issues and bringing community together, what they can do for the youth. So we have Mr. Stephen Dandridge here today, and then we also have Mr. Eddie Saunders, and they're going to be on later after we take our first break with Dolores. And I apologize, Detroit, I have laryngitis, as you can hear.
She's getting better. She's getting better. Detroit.
I'm getting better. Trust me, this is better, because some people are like, oh my God, what's going on with you? But Dolores is going to finish the rest of the episode with these two gentlemen, and they're going to be sharing information and a little bit about their stories, which are phenomenal.
Awesome.
To just take that kind of effort, to go out in the community and want to do something with youth.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to these gentlemen and just hearing their plight and their stance on community involvement.
right.
Which is, like I said, just truly long overdue. Long overdue. So,
Yeah.
so stay tuned, Detroit. Like Marshall mentioned earlier, these gentlemen have come up with a wealth of knowledge and information that you're going to want to hear.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
indeed.
we're on our first break, so we're gonna break and just stay tuned. Come back, and you're gonna hear some phenomenal things about their organizations, how they started, just decisions they made from youth to adulthood. Because that sometimes that impacts as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you hear this message, wherever you stand, I'm calling every woman, calling every man. We're the generation we can't afford to wait.
Welcome back to Detroit and good morning. As I mentioned, welcome back again to Empowered Living. As I mentioned earlier, Marshall said we have some phenomenal guests. We have Mr. Dandridge on my left, and we have Mr. Sanders on my right. I guess as Marshall mentioned earlier in the show, these gentlemen were at the Peace in the Streets conference last week in Wayne State, and once again, I can't say enough about the wonderful things that we were exposed to and heard, and just trying to just move forward, building bridges and filling the gaps in our community. So once again, Mr. Dandridge is a part of the Excellent Choices Leadership Training Corporation. This is one of the CEOs and founders of that information, and Mr. Sanders works with juvenile lifers and also paralegals. Is that correct? Right. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. We're going to get right into it. Mr. Dandridge, I want you to tell our viewers if you can explain Excellent Choices and about excellent leadership.
Okay, I have two organizations, actually part of three.
Okay.
But, first one is Excellent Choices, LLC, which provides services for the youth.
Okay.
We do a lot of classroom things with the youth. We also do workshops, and I incorporate some physical fitness activity also with basketball, because that's something that catches them, grabs their attention.
Right.
And then I give them the other pieces that they need. We do a lot of things with peer pressure, character development, anger management, conflict resolution, which is huge, building up the critical thinking skills.
Okay.
So, that right there is paramount to get our youth to learn how to deal with daily stressors. So that's what we offer there. Now with the excellent leadership training, I do some like conflict in the workplace. I actually did a training Friday at Great Lakes Water Authority. Up in Port Huron, me and my partner, Dr. Eason, and we did it on diversity training.
Okay.
Which was huge, and got some great feedback on that. And then the third one is NewYoungFathers.com, which is a family nonprofit. CEO is my nephew, Andre Dandridge. Him, myself, and a brother of mine, Christopher. We kind of hatched that idea, brainstorming, because we read a story about a young man who was caught up in the child support system, and they had raised his payments a couple hundred per month, and he had 3 different mothers of children.
Okay.
And he went and killed each one of them, and then killed himself.
Wow.
And it was
based on him not able to afford the purchase of a child support. I'm guessing.
That's what I'm assuming too. And it just struck us like, man, we need some kind of resources or services out here for young men, young fathers, period. He was in his early 20s. And, when you go places, you see pamphlets for the young ladies, young mothers, prenatal care, early childhood development, things like that. But we don't have any of those resources for men. It just, they're part of that process also.
Right.
And then the front of the court system or child support services system, once you get caught up in that, it's
I've heard horror stories.
I'm
gonna be honest with you. I've heard some horror stories.
Right.
Especially, and I don't mean to play the sexist card, but I hear it's really not friendly to men or fathers. We'll say it's not friendly to fathers. But,
right. But there's ways to navigate through that too, to try to make it as painless as possible. But I feel like that's all the process of creating a division on the family unit.
Yes.
Which is
yes.
Which this generation, my generation, and the generation after me, you're seeing the effects of it with incarceration, high school dropout rates, babies having babies, and I can so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. What got you interested in working with the juvenile lifers?
Well, I'm a former juvenile lifer myself, and I would emphasize this is what these gentlemen are, and young ladies that I'm working with. They are former juvenile lifers. These are former kids that were placed in adult prison systems and have become adults within those systems. I started to take and work with them while in prison myself. I served practically the past 43 years in prison. I went in prison in '75, and I just returned home just past July the 6th. And I went in practically right after my 17th birthday, and I'm out just before my 60th birthday. And thank God I'm still of good health and good mind. But the effort started with taking and reaching out and assisting others who were similarly situated as myself. And it's continued even as I have gotten out. While they're in prison, before the United States Supreme Court had actually made a decision on the matter of having the system take a second look at these former children who had committed homicide. In most instances, most of the juvenile lifers that are serving time are not the principal. But in either case, the U.S. Supreme Court has took and insisted on the system. And when I say the system, we're saying not just simply the court, but the institutions in which they were sentenced to serve out their life, to take a second look. And the U.S. Supreme Court has taken the position that most of these former kids are innocent of the sentence. And what they mean by that in terms of innocent of the sentence is that the sentence, anytime that a person is convicted for first degree, there's an automatic sentence of life. And then there's a parole statute that kicks in with the penal statute, and it say without the possibility of parole. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court has taken the position that they, in most instances, these former kids are innocent of that type of penalty where you would say that there's no hope left for them. So they're saying take another look, because recent science and neuro science was introduced to the court and presented in a way that it was very persuasive, and the court has noted that each time they have went back and looked at the matter, the science is more definitive in terms of demonstrating clearly that children are less culpable at the time of their youth, and they're more capable of reform as they grow up. You know, and so, and this is a statement also not to just simply the criminal justice system, but even to our community. You know, we should take and remember that some of the bad choices and the behaviors that our youth and young adults may be participating in today may not be them tomorrow. Give them a chance to take and grow up. Take a second look at them. Sometimes we stigmatize people and say, okay, this is what such and such did, and he's going to always be like that, and that's not the case. He or she is not going to always be like that, and there's science to take and prove that.
Yeah, and that's what you said too, because we need to get out of that stereotype and this type of thing, and just as you said, systematically just labeling some of these of youth because of, I don't know, maybe because of I guess maybe how they grew up, or they may have a connection of an older or sibling. Maybe the mother or father might have been incarcerated, so we might automatically say that, well, it's just that parent was acts that way, then that's how they're going to be too, and that is wrong.
And actually, the court has considered all of those things, the environmental factors that plays in to a youth, and acknowledge that children don't have the ability or the luxury or resources of taking and rescuing themselves from environments that might not be nourishing to them. You know, they are at the mercy of the environment that they are placed in.
Right.
And the Supreme Court has done that. You know, like many times in the African American community, we say that when a non-African American is arrested, we see the media and everyone begin to take and talk about the social factors and the psychological factors that might be involved in the person committing that offense. We never hear that when minorities, you know, so-called minorities commit offenses. And this is what the Supreme Court has finally did in the case of children who commit offenses. And those children, in most instances, are young African Americans.
Right.
Most of the kids in this country, and I should point out that this country, the United States, not just simply Michigan, but this country have more children incarcerated in adult facilities than any country on the earth. You know, and Michigan is one of the states. We are we have the second highest rate of children serving time in adult facilities. Okay, so this is
horrible.
yes, this is a very horrific thing, and despite the U.S. Supreme Court's recent ruling, many of the prosecutors has taken the stance that they have petitioned the court to resentence these former youths to life in prison without the possibility of parole in astonishing numbers. I mean, it's ironic. They have said that, hey, more than 60% of them is still unworthy to return back to society. And
Children, huh?
yes,
Children.
one of the individuals, for example, to show how outrageous this decision is by these prosecutors. One of the gentlemen, our longest serving juvenile lifer here in Michigan, the longest serving one, and this gentleman, Mr. Tops, I believe he got something like 53 years in now. So imagine that a kid been in prison since he was like 17 years old, 16, 17 years old, and he done already served 52, 53 years in prison. And you saying that even as a, you know, he can't be paroled nowhere but to a convalescent home.
Yeah,
And you
right.
say, you know, but it just throws a light on the rest of the cases. The first thing that I did prior to these U.S. Supreme Court cases, there's a woman here in Detroit that has a grassroots paper, which is the Voice of Detroit, Diane Banofsky. You guys might be familiar with her. She used to take and work for what was the other African American newspaper here?
Michigan Chronicle.
Yeah, not Michigan Chronicle.
Michigan Citizen.
Michigan Citizen. She
right.
used to be one of the prominent writers for Michigan Citizen, and I used to take and put together a folder of the other guys. I would have them to give me a photograph of themselves, possibly their family, and others who were visiting them. I would take and critique information from the case file. I would take and get information from them as to how they were doing presently in the prison system, and I would send this stuff to her. Mm-hmm. So my objective was to take and humanize these guys, and I would explain that, and I would ask the guys to give a phone number of your mother, your parent, your father. In some cases, some of the guys who got married while they're in prison, or they didn't have long-term girlfriends and so forth. And I said, have them to contact Diane and talk to Diane. You want to humanize yourself. You're not just a case. You're not just a past crime that was committed. That's a serious offense. Taking another person's life is a serious offense, and it's not to be taken and brushed away lightly. You know, sure, the deceased doesn't get a second chance. You know, as we say, they doesn't get a second chance. But the crime has been committed, and these individuals who are still living are still members of our community. No matter where we put them, they're still members of our community.
Well, gentlemen, let me ask you another question too. With both of your organizations, what was the inspiration for these organizations?
Well, I did mention it for the newyoungfathers.com. But my inspiration was I've always, especially with the excellent choices, I've always, been involved with the youth.
Okay.
And in sports, that was the connection.
That was the connection.
And then with my own children, I got 17-year-old twins, a 22-year-old son, and a 10-year-old son. So I'm 11 in about a week. So, I'm going through the same angst that the average parent is.
Right.
But overall, I have not had any major issues with my children, and I'm a divorcee.
That's a blessing.
But myself and my ex have stayed on the same page when it comes to raising our children, despite anything else that may be going on between us.
So important. I'm glad you said that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So my objective was when I left, when we split up, my oldest was 8 and my twins were 4.
Okay.
So my thing was I had to stay in that household somehow as a positive male influence. Because I was still their father. I didn't stop being their father at
Right.
all. We just are no longer husband and wife. So I know I got the blueprint for how it can be done, especially when you're talking about the African American household, because we always looking at that in the realm of failure.
Right.
And I'm tired of our youth always being looked at where it's subliminal that they're going to be a failure in life.
Right.
I have a problem with that. I always try to talk about successes and ways to attain success or start that path towards success. And by that I mean being able to take care of yourself, being able to take care of your family, not having to be incarcerated. That's not a badge of honor, but they expect that from us. They get billions and billions of dollars to do research on my grandfather going to prison, my father going to prison. I'm going to go to prison. At least probably one of my children are going to go to prison. That's crazy. But it doesn't have to be like that. And the only way that we can break that chain or that mindset is to start putting or reinforcing positivity and showing them. Because if they're not exposed to it, I don't have a problem if somebody makes a mistake, a major mistake.
Right.
Because we all human. We all have. But let's expose the next generation to things other than just anything in a negative form or fashion.
Right.
I know we fighting against the media influences.
Yes.
We fighting against the music,
Yeah.
the perception when it comes to minorities, that we got less than. We got to, all we can do is be in a supportive role.
Yes.
And we don't own anything. That when I was a kid, most of the businesses in my community were still minority owned. At least half of them. My father owned the cleaners. His brother owned the cleaners. My father was a millwright. He owned the cleaners, and his brother owned the cleaners. It was 8 of us, 7 boys and 1 girl. We was eating up everything, breaking up everything.
Big family.
Police knocking on our door. That
Exactly.
the whole gamut. My oldest brother, who just passed, rest in peace, had a PhD. I got 2 brothers that did 20 years in prison. So we know all of that. That's part. That's part of the African American experience. So what I try to do is give those nuggets of wisdom to the next generation, I want them to see me, as a positive, well-spoken, still Detroit flavored man, because I'm never gonna lose it. I embrace that.
I heard that.
I embrace that.
Not running away from it, embracing it.
Yes. Don't run from it. That's who you are. That's in the fiber of your being.
Exactly.
But I came from a 2-parent household till my father passed. So I saw once he passed how things changed too. So that's like taking a father out of the equation. And I vow, even though I got divorced, I vow not to ever drop the ball as far as that was concerned. Because I got 3 sons and a daughter. I don't want any of them going to prison if they don't have to. You
said something that I think was paramount and phenomenal too. Even though you and your ex-wife didn't continue to make it as a married couple,
right?
But you and the mother of your children,
right,
had somehow sat down and agreed to stay on the same page when it comes to raising your children. That is truly, true words can never be spoken, because by me working in the educational field, we don't see enough of that from our students whose parents are divorced. Dad has one philosophy, and mom's a different philosophy, and then when that child comes to school, well, first of all, it's a level of dysfunction. Let's be real. That's one level of dysfunction of many of levels of what comes in the household. But that in particular is a level of dysfunction that we as educators have to deal with. And now that's another hurdle that we have to try to overcome, just to teach this young baby, this young child who still wants to learn, but has all these hurdles to come through. And now it just makes our job a little difficult. Because mom and dad aren't on the same page, and that's my soapbox to Troy.
How are they going to learn? That's the thing. They deal with so much trauma. The trauma infused piece is what I really try to, go in the school systems and talk to some of the educators.
Yes.
Like I'm in the school as a vendor. I've been to several schools. But first of all, the paradigm it has to change. The model's not working. The model that worked during my my child
Oh,
was
it's
growing
different
up
now.
because they
It's
got so
different.
many other things going on. They're raising themselves.
Yeah.
They're dealing
different
with
now.
all kind of things in their household
If
before they even get
if
to
I may
school.
interject,
Sure.
and it's a beautiful subject that you guys are on. You're talking about where a union them broke up, or where there are variables that are making the household dysfunctional, that union. And we done took in, and I said we people as African Americans, we have been exposed to, and it's been perpetuated, a misconception of how we deal with challenges to our family, from a historical perspective. That's incorrect. We have this idea that the weight, when it's put on the African American family or put on the African American male, that the family takes and fall apart. Well, the reality is when we came here as Africans, not when we came here, but when we were brought here as Africans in chains,
Okay.
we didn't come as immigrants. When we were brought here, through this horrific
Forced.
crime,
Forced here.
through this
Yeah.
crime, through
Right.
this crime against humanity,
Absolutely.
when we were brought here, Africans took the position, these Africans that were brought here to this continent, they took the position, and there's research that validates this, but this is not what we're given. This isn't what's perpetuated. You would find that these individuals that were put in captivity, they turned around and labored and then paid for their own liberty. But they wouldn't get back on a bus and go back, or a ship and go back to Africa, until they took and retrieved other members of their family. We have scholars that are failing us in not taking and putting this kind of thing on the table. We have individuals that are calling themselves centrics, African centrics, and others. They're spending time with Eurocentric information and throwing things across the table at each other in terms of theology and so forth, as opposed to taking and saying, look, this is what happened in our history, irregardless of what this person's faith was or whoever. We're spending too much time with that kind of stuff instead of bringing out information that can be constructive for us to have a positive image. Imagine your great grandfather, and slavery ain't that long, so I'm saying your great grandfather.
Right.
My great grandfather was a former slave, and I met him. Because people try to talk about where it's supposed to have been something that was a long time ago. But imagine your great grandfather, your great great grandfather, that when he or your grandmother, when he or she came over here, turned around while they were in slavery, paid for themselves to get out, and then turned around and wouldn't leave until they searched and found other members of their family to take and provide the same means of transportation back to a land that they were taken from. Well, we haven't been given this image, but Garvey is something late. Garvey isn't something that's that phenomena is the only phenomena we have. I'm not trying to take anything from Garvey, but what Garvey did is late. We were doing that when we came here originally, and so we need to get on that page. We need to get on that page, and if we had that image, imagine yourself as a slave, saying that you won't eat from the other slaves' labor. This is what I done read books where fellow Muslims was doing this. They were saying that's not halal, so I can't eat that. A person put that on the table as a result of forced labor. So they insisted, allow me to purchase my own land and farm my own land to eat off of. So we down to this obscure thing, or this absurd thing about taking and talking about not eating pork. That ain't the only thing that's not halal. Halal is taking and eating something that is illegal, that's haram, period. And so here, imagine the Africans, they were taking that attitude, saying, I'm not going to eat that. That came from a slave's labor. So he insists, even though he's in slavery, he insists, let me take and work and get my own land so I can take and feed myself and my family, because I can't eat what you got from him, because you got him in captivity. So imagine if we seen that image. This is the real image. If we seen that real image, not this so-called black slavery, this Negro slavery, but this slavery of humanity, where we maintained our dignity even in those harsh conditions, and that's important. If we see that African American men and women wouldn't take the attitude that we do right now, that when the situation is bad, then I resort to a drug pack. I'm gonna throw some drugs off in the community the same time I'm preaching out the other side of my mouth. And I think that this is appropriate. But if you see that true image, you couldn't do that.
Once again, we back to exposing people to information. I mean, things are, if you don't expose them to it, then they just don't know.
Yeah.
I don't call it a sign of ignorance. I'm just saying that the resources have to be available. Case in point, if you put jobs in our communities, first of all, job training opportunities, because a man wants to take care of himself and take care of his family.
First of all,
every man I've encountered, I haven't met one man in my life that said, Steve Dandridge, I am not going to take care of my responsibilities. I refuse to. Are you kidding me? Absolutely not. It's just exposing them to it and making resources readily available.
Yes.
That makes you feel good as a man, period. So
it instills pride.
It instills pride. Yeah. And then your children, because they watch every move we make.
Absolutely.
So now they want to mimic you, and now I want to go to work. I want to do what my dad's doing, or what my mother's doing. So, now you're starting to change the thought process.
There you go.
So that we can learn how to take care of each other and take care of your families. And now you can change the generational. You can turn it back around, do a 180 on it, because obviously it's been flipped the other way at this point. So those are things I try to instill with my programs, especially with the youth. It's just, first of all, I want you to feel good about yourself.
Right.
Number one, build your confidence up. You always get your confidence torn down. You just like your daddy, or
too much negativity.
You're not gonna be anything in life. You ain't never been nothing.
Yeah.
You can't learn. Everything is set up for them to fail. Like in my program now, I looked at, they had a card marking this past week, and I say 80% of the kids in my program, these are high schoolers. They got an F in math. You got to be able to count. You got to be able to add, subtract, divide. Talking about your money, talking about taking care of yourself.
That's right.
So what I did the other day in school, and some of the teachers and administrators may have had a problem with it, but let me run my classroom the way I want to run it.
Okay.
So I put different questions up. I put exponents. I put fractions up. I put linear equations. I put area and perimeter, because I got 9th and 10th graders, so I did the geometry and algebra 1 and 2. And I put questions up, combine like terms, things like that. Let's do some factoring, because I've always been strong in math. Thank you. And if they answered it, and I did a question, I did an example for them, and then I put up other similar equations. And if the children came up and worked them out, figured it out, then I gave them $1. Now I'm speaking their language. They get something immediately.
Exactly. Right.
Give me something, I'm going to give you something. I had about
gratification.
25 singles that I went and got purposely that morning.
Did you lose them all that morning?
I gave them all up. That's right.
All right.
And they said, listen, again,
Your class was motivated.
They said, can we do this again tomorrow?
He said
Can we do it
Yes.
again tomorrow?
Yes.
And now they saw that there is an immediate reward for your intelligence too. Now,
Yes, it is. It's a method to the madness.
someone will pay you for your intellectual skills. So that's what we need to do.
He said a group of kids asked, can we do math again tomorrow?
Tomorrow. And they said, wow, once I showed them how to do something, they were like, wow, you explain it better than my teacher.
They want to do it again tomorrow.
That's right. So you gotta make sure that you connect with them, because they get information and things, and their value system is different than ours. So, that's instant gratification for them.
Right,
But at the
right.
same time, now I can put that on a sheet of paper next week, not give them $1, and they can figure it out.
Right.
Like I said, exposure.
Set them up for success.
Well,
you.
listen,
Thank you.
Detroit, we're gonna come on to a break coming up. Don't go anywhere, because this is a phenomenal historic lesson, a history lesson, I must say, for these powerful gentlemen. And like I said, don't go away. Get a cup of tea, get a cup of coffee, get whatever your heart desires for this morning. And when we return, we're going to continue this powerful message of these men taking an active role in the community. So please stay tuned and come right back.
If you hear this message, wherever you stand, I'm calling every woman, calling every man. We're the generation we can't afford to wait.
And welcome back to Empowered Living. And I'm still here with my special guests, Mr. Dandridge and Mr. Sanders. And I want to move on, gentlemen, to another question. How would you both give insight on how life skills, when youth gain them at an early age, and help them learn how to handle work relationships? I'll ask that again. How would you both give insight on the youth to gain life skills, and how can they gain them at an early age?
Well, I always say just add another tool in the toolbox.
Okay.
Or on your tool belt, So I think expose them early kind of gives them a direction or possibilities of directions that they want to go into. Like I'm big on the skilled trades.
Skilled trades, okay.
Which we are not exposed to that like we used to be. I know, like I said, my father was a millwright, skilled tradesman, and that was commonplace for African American men to be in the skilled trades field. And I've always wondered, why do they wait till the 9th grade to start talking about the Votech Center or Votech centers and start exposing our youth
That's
skilled
too late.
trades?
That's too late for you, in other words.
To me, it
It's
should
too
be in
late.
6th grade, 5th or 6th grade. Let's start it earlier on. And then by the time they get to the 9th grade, now you've been exposed to it 3 years. So you got a general idea and some experience, some training on some areas of that you may want to go into once you graduate. Because you can go to, become an apprentice. And for most programs are 5 years. And you're going to work your first year. Then you're going to start going to school a day a week or 2 days a week in addition to working. So you're making earnings, because earnings is you working for it.
Right.
So you're able to make money, earnings, while you're still learning. So that, so 5 years down the road, you could be a journeyman at that point in whatever field you want to go in and still continue to learn. You can take care of yourself and your family for the rest of your life, anywhere. Just walk around, drive around. It's building everywhere. Construction is everywhere. And we are in scarcity supply when it comes to, I always look and see, are any of us out there working, building up in our city? So, we need to expose our youth to that earlier. Other things that we need to expose them to is developing their character.
Okay.
And their critical thinking, problem-solving skills.
There you go.
Let's not just react here.
There you go.
Because, we're assertive by nature, aggressive and assertive
we
by
are.
nature. So we got to think. I always tell all the youth, look, take 30 seconds or 45 seconds or 60 seconds. If I ask you a question, don't just blurt out something on auto reply. Take it in, absorb it for a minute, and now put a succinct, intelligent response.
Internalize it.
Internalize it and give it back to me where you thought. Don't just tell me if I ask how you doing, I'm all right. I had a bad day. I had a good day. No, I want to know how really, how are you doing? You got to learn how to articulate that.
Absolutely.
So now, whatever set or wherever you are in the world, whatever set I'm on, I'm planning on being comfortable when I walk in the room. Period. Because if somebody asks me something, I'm gonna take my time, like you said, internalize it, and then I'm gonna give them a response. You got to start thinking instead of reacting. And I know that's hard. I tell the children, I've been 15 before, 17, 12, 21. I understand, but we have to learn how to start tempering some of that and thinking more.
I tell a lot of my students too that I always remember the 4 T's. Remember, Sally, what's the 4 T's? Take time to think.
Yes.
Because absolutely, and I think if they embrace that and engulf that, that will help them with some help them to alleviate a lot of knee-jerk reactions. Don't react, be proactive. So again, Mr. Sanders, how these life skills at an early age? What's your take on that, sir?
There is hardly a young African American child that doesn't appreciate sports, whether you're talking about baseball, basketball, or football.
Okay.
And what each one of these sports have in common is that they are organizational.
And a team sport.
They're organization.
Okay.
And so we need to take, and as parents and as a community, to start taking and looking at it like that. Those are institutions that they can gain skills from.
Absolutely.
That can carry on farther in life. as opposed to saying you're playing ball too much. We should encourage it, not because we think that Johnny gonna get mama out of the ghetto. You know,
Right.
that
Right.
happens in very few cases.
Very
you know,
rare, absolutely.
but nevertheless, Johnny, Paul, and Ronnie, and all the rest of them are gaining skills that can be used in the real world. And we should start having a sit down with them about the game that they are playing, and we should talk to them about the game from a different perspective. Remind them that this is an organizational sports. What it means as an organization is take two or more peoples to take in to play, and it takes some critical skills. You have to take and strategize how you're going to play.
Strategy, yes.
You know, how you going to beat the other team. You have to
Right.
measure the other team. You have to measure your own team. You have to recognize the members on your team that are strong in certain areas versus their weakness. And you have to take and recognize the strength and the weakness on the other team. Okay, so right there, you're beginning to take and teach them not just to take and dribble the ball and throw it in the hoop, but you reminding them to take and be able to dribble that ball successfully. You got to have somebody that's screening the other person to allow you to get down the court. So that means you have to learn to cooperate. Okay, you have to learn to cooperate with other people in order to obtain what you want. Okay, these are skills
Yeah.
Yeah.
that takes and spill off into other areas of your life. And these are leadership skills as well as a team member skills. And you have to let them know that gaining team member skills is just as important as gaining the skill as the leader.
Absolutely.
The leader has the skills of everybody else that's on the team. And so you have to be a team player at some point. You know, so as opposed to taking and rebuking them for taking and playing sports, sit down and have the conversation with them about the many skills that they would obtain from that sports, and tell them, when you spend that much time that you're spending on that game, I expect for you to bring some skills away from the game when you come away from it. You should be able to communicate effectively. You should be able to take and be patient. You should be able to take and plan short, intermediary, and long term. You know, so this is what we should be expecting from them, and we should enforce it. When they're doing something, remind them, hey, don't you do differently than that when you're on the court? Aren't you thinking about, you know, A, B, and C? So reinforce it, you know, now and then, that conversation that you had. And they will begin to take and think about that game in a much more significant way. Or like in your case, you talk about math. A lot of us African Americans, we fall short on that for whatever reason.
Right.
We're falling short. Well, how about taking a pool table and getting yourself a laborer and have, you know, this person to measure the table. There are numbers on that table, you know, and you have to hit certain angles to get it in certain
That's all
boxes.
math.
You
All
can
math.
play,
All
you
math.
can take and
School
do
is all
math
math.
with the table
Yep.
of how the angles
You're right.
sit up. You can't do that unless you know that you can show them how to play this game mathematically.
That's right.
You know,
Pool is math.
It
Pool
is
pool
math.
Is angles. Pool is geometry. Pool is
Yes,
pool
it
is
is.
pool is
Card playing.
Card playing.
there's
is
numbers
math.
in that.
Yes,
You
I
know,
agree.
there's a
Math.
suit. There's suits in it.
That's right.
And each
Certain
one of them
number of
have
cards,
a
certain
certain number of
hearts, right.
cards. I mean, a
Yeah.
certain number of suits. And so if you got so many in your hand, there's so many on the table. So you start teaching them like that with things they're actually doing.
Right.
You know, so sometimes we are just saying, don't do that, instead of looking, what can I find in that he's doing? You know, and so that's how we have to
Or,
start
and I'm glad
approaching,
you mentioned that
reapproach
too,
it.
Mr. Summers, because sometimes there are some conventional ways to teach math and some basic skills through these areas. I remember a young lady telling me that she learned, I want to say she learned some algebra by learning how to play chess.
Yes.
And I could have put the two together, but after she explained it, I
Thank you.
said,
Thank
wow,
you.
you know,
Thank
so
you.
so it was mind blowing. Like I said, I love to learn, gentlemen. I love to learn. I love to learn new things. So sometimes some things we might see them as unconventional are truly conventional, and are getting through to these kids. Well, some teachers, and I'm not blaming teachers. I mean, they have a hard
absolutely
job,
not. Absolutely
but
not.
sometimes I guess we have to take a step back and look at some other ways of how we can reach.
Well, everybody doesn't get everything the same way.
Right.
we all process things differently.
Differentiate it. We differentiate.
Yes.
Differentiate it.
So what you do is, I say, find a sweet spot, whatever it is, and then if the light bulb goes off or on, and say, okay, this is how I'm understanding it. Then that's okay. Like I tell them, you all think want to be rappers. You ask them, I want to be a rap artist, and that's cool.
That's right.
But let me rap these numbers, or rap that book you just read, or that poem, or that essay. Rap, if that helps it stick in your mind, because it blows my mind. My kids are riding with me. They know the lyrics to every song that comes on the radio.
Just when they can think. That skill. They have a skill.
So that tells me, number one, that you're brilliant.
Yes.
So if you need to rap it or sing it to yourself to retain it, then by all means, do your thing.
Be creative.
That you guys are on creativity and the arts.
Right.
Imagine this. Imagine a leader of a world religion, a religion that would become a world religion. Imagine that leader when he was being attacked, or when his scriptures were being attacked. He resorted to taking an axe and a port to take and defend him. To defend him. Okay, so, and this happened during the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad. May Allah be pleased with him. During his lifetime, this man took and resorted to taking an axe and an individual who was a well-known port at the time in pre-Islam. He asked this individual to defend him against the other ports that was attacking him, that was rebuking him and putting him down and attacking his message. So he resorted to someone of that stature, where today we look at our rappers and we take and put them down.
Right.
But imagine someone of that stature defending a religious institution today. Well, that happened actually in history. It happened actually in history. And not only did the prophet ask this individual was known to have all kind of character flaws, but the prophet was always, you work, religion, that's what you work with.
Right.
As a minister, you know that.
Yes.
You work with damaged material. You don't go to material and say, I want God, give me something that's perfect to deal with. You work with damaged material, and you know how to restore it. This is what, when Christ say, if the salt has lost its savior, throw it out. You expect to take the impurities out of the meat with that salt. And this is what the Prophet Muhammad did. He had his institution, his message defended by a port. This person defended his message and defended him. And so the reason I'm pointing this out is, you was mentioning rappers. We want to discard these guys. They got all kind of derogatory things that they're saying in these lyrics about women, even about our culture. We had one fool that wanted to take and say something derogatory about the incident with Emmett Till, and somebody had to sit him down and let him know what he was saying to get him back on page. And and it seemed like we have to do that every day, but that's not to say that there isn't important potential and abilities there. Gil Scott Heron is a good example of that. Even though he was afflicted, his whole life, and he said he was a mirror of his father. He was afflicted his whole life with drug addiction, but we know that he gave us lyrics that were socially conscious.
Absolutely.
Or whether you're talking about some of the other artists, Billy Paul. Some of these individuals gave us lyrics that are socially conscious, and this is what we're asking from these rappers. We're not telling you not to take and do your thing and rapping. We're asking you, just like African American artists days gone, we're asking you to follow their tradition and get on the page of taking and giving us words of inspiration, giving us words of insight, and that was one of the raps that Gil Scott did. He had on one of his cuts a message to the messengers, where he was explaining to rappers, don't call a sister one day you're a queen, and the next day, you say something else about her, and he was like, if you ain't got nothing good to say about her, just leave her alone. But we need them. We don't need to take and discard them. We just need to encourage them to give us something of value. Give us something of value we can use.
We got a generation hanging on every word, every lyric, for sure.
Well, Detroit, I can stay here for another hour. because these gentlemen have given us so much to really consume and so much to think about. We're going to, again, I'm going to try to hopefully invite these gentlemen back and continue this conversation. On behalf of Marshall Bryant and myself, Laura Allen, I want to thank our guests again, Mr. Dandridge and Mr. Saunders here for being men and the active men in the community and trying to uplift and target our youth to a straight and narrow path. Again, thank you for joining me for another episode of Empowered Living, and we'll see you on our next episode.
If you hear this message, wherever you stand, I'm calling every woman.